Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. It's Tuesday, time to talk about some new releases coming out this Friday, July 21st. We got a little over 300 albums coming out. I got 10 on the list for today. There's a bunch of links down below. Make sure you go check them out. There's links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlists we put together every week, and the Patreon page. Make sure you go check all that out. Of course, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me the old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So like I said in the intro, there's a little over 300 albums coming out this week. I'm only going to talk about 10 on the show today, though. So if there's something I don't talk about, make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you're looking forward to picking up. And like always, if you're unable to find any of these in your local brick and mortar stores, I'll put the links down below. These should all be available online. There's a couple of big new releases coming out this week. The first one is one I've been really excited for ever since it was first announced. I've had it on pre-order at my local record store since it was first announced. This is Greta Van Fleet, Starcatcher. It is their third studio album. There's multiple variants of this going to be available. I know I think there's a white version of it. I think there's a clear version. There's a couple of other versions they got available on their website. So it should be pretty easy to grab a copy this week. This is going to run you about $28. This was produced by Dave Cobb. Dave has done a bunch of great stuff. He's worked with Chris Stapleton, Zach Brown, Lone Bellow. He also did the new Rival Sons album that came out this year, which I've absolutely loved since I got my hands on it. It's one of my favorite albums of the year so far. So it's definitely what I'm looking forward to grabbing this week. I will say, this is the one thing this is the one issue I have with albums over the last couple of years. So there's 10 songs on this album. They've already released 4 of them as singles. So they've already released almost half of the album before the album even comes out. So I think you lose. I wish they'd kind of go back to, just kind of holding off and releasing maybe one single before the album comes out, because I feel like you lose a lot of the momentum or a lot of the anticipation for a new release when you've already heard almost half of the album. But I'm definitely looking forward to this album. I'm definitely going to grab that, pick up my copy this week. And then the other new release you got coming out this week, this is Blur's new album, The Ballad of Darren, their 9th studio album. Blur, one of the biggest indie rock bands that come out of the UK over the last, really probably the last 20 or 30 years. A bunch of great albums. If you're not really all that familiar with them, I definitely go back and check them out. This is their first new album since 2015. Just like that Greta Van Fleet album, there's going to be multiple versions of this also going to be available. It's also going to run you about $28 this week. So definitely those 2 new releases this week I got on my list. Got a couple of pretty cool looking jazz releases coming out this week. The first one, this is Ornette Coleman, Something Else. This was released back in 1958. This is part of the Contemporary Records Acoustic Sound Series. It's mastered by Bernie Grumman from the original analog tapes. It's pressed to QRP, so this thing is going to sound fantastic. It's one of my favorite jazz albums of all time, and there's been a bunch of pressings of this over the years, but I think this is going to be the definitive copy to have of this great jazz release. It's going to run you about $30 online, so you got there's a great lineup on here too. You got Don Cherry, Walter Norris, Don Payne, Billy Higgins, kind of like a who's who from that late 50s period. Like I said, if you're into jazz music and you haven't listened to this one, this is definitely a great one to grab. Then you've also got Bill Evans' Trio at the Village Vanguard coming out this week, released back in 1961. This is also known as Sunday at the Village Vanguard, so you'll see it named both ways. There's been a bunch of pressings over the years of this great release, kind of widely seen as one of the greatest live jazz albums of all time. It's going to run you about $20 online. I think this is a great one to grab. I know Craft Recordings just released part 2 to this, which is called Waltz for Debbie. They released it as part of the original Jazz Classic series a couple of weeks back. If you grab that one, this is definitely another great one to grab also. This album, like I said, it's widely seen as one of the greatest live jazz albums of all time, but it really kind of marked the end of a really great period for the Bill Evans Trio. Their bassist, Scott LaFaro, would die in a car accident about 10 days after this concert was done, or this performance was done. And after his death, it really changed Bill Evans moving forward. He took a long hiatus before he did anything after that concert, and when he reformed the band, the style changed, but I mean they did release some great stuff after that also. But it was just that kind of marked the end of a great period for Bill. So this week you got Life and Times by Jim Croce being reissued. This was first released back in 1973. It was his fourth studio album celebrating his 50th anniversary. It's going to be on blue vinyl. It's going to run you about $24 online. So this was the last album to be released during Jim's life. I think he died in September of 73, so just a couple of months after that album came out. Bad Bad Leroy Brown was a big hit off of that album. He was actually nominated for a couple of Grammys also for that album. So that's definitely one I got on my list for this week. You also got the Vandals, Hitler Bad, Vandals Good coming out. This was released back in 1998. Their seventh studio album is going to be on white and blue splatter vinyl. You know, if you're unfamiliar with the Vandals, they do great punk rock, but it's with this really interesting, humorous kind of twist. It's different from a lot of other stuff you were seeing come out in that late 90s, early 2000s period. So you got there's two great covers on here. You got Come Out Fighting, which is a great song by Pennywise, and then you've got So Long Farewell, which of course is from The Sound of Music. The Vandals do a great job with both of those. If you're unfamiliar with it, definitely make sure you go back out and at least stream that album before you head out to the record store this week. I will say that Jerry Finn actually was one of the engineers on this album. Jerry worked on a bunch of great punk albums, late 90s, early 2000s. Stuff by Rancid. I know he worked on And Out Come the Wolves. He worked on Dookie by Green Day. He worked, of course, on the, Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. He also did Enema State. He did Blink-182's Untitled album also from 2003. Just a bunch of great stuff that he did before his death. I think it was 2008 when Jerry died. But so he worked on here also. He worked his magic touch on this album. I think it is one of the best Vandals albums. Like I said, if you're a punk fan, definitely stream that one and check it out. So blues is something I don't talk a lot about here on the channel. It's probably one of my least listened to genres. Even though I really do love some of the stuff from there, B.B. King is my favorite blues musician. This week he got a great album of his being reissued. This is Indianola, Mississippi Seeds. This was released back in 1970. It was his 18th studio album. It's going to run you about $29 online. I think it's kind of widely seen as one of BB's greatest albums. It's an absolute masterpiece that he released. And there's a bunch of great guest appearances on here. You got Leon Russell, Joe Walsh, Carole King. Like I said, if you haven't listened to this album, if you're not a big blues fan, I highly, highly recommend you checking that one out because it is a really great one. And then this week you've also got Death Cab for Cutie reissuing Transatlanticism. Death Cab for Cutie over the last several months has been reissuing large parts of their catalog. This is the next release of theirs. So this came out back in 2003. This is their fourth studio album. It's a double LP celebrating its 20th anniversary. It's going to run you about $30 online. In my opinion, and I'm not the biggest Death Cab for Cutie fan when I say this, in my opinion, one of the best indie rock albums of the 2000s. It is a great release. It's one I definitely have on my list for this week. And with this release, with this 20th anniversary release that they're doing, it's not on a physical format, but it does come digital only, a bunch of demos that they did for this album. So it's really kind of cool, even though I'd love to see them if they're going to do an LP release. I know I've talked about this recently with other releases also. I'm not a huge fan of digital only stuff because when they do digital only, it tends to only be MP3 and they don't sound all that great. I guess if they're going to do a digital only, at least do like a lossless file, but I get it. They're trying to save money. They don't want to put on an extra disc with the LP. So I don't know. I'll definitely, it's one I've got on my maybe list for this week. So this week you're getting a reissue of an album that up until 2020 was highly sought after, had not been available, I think, since it was first released. But this week you're getting a reissue of Stage by Great White. This was first released back in 1995. It's a live album, double LP. It's on silver vinyl. It's going to run you about $35 online. So this is kind of split. So this is split up into two different shows that's on this live album. So the first 6 tracks are from their 1994 House of Blues benefit concert, and then the last 7 tracks are from their Anaheim, California concert in 1993. So this was unavailable until, like I said, 2020. They did a 25th anniversary release of it. I think that one was also on silver vinyl. So I think this is just a reissue of that 2020 pressing. Like I said, it was one of those highly sought after, had been unavailable for like I said, a couple of decades when it was reissued back a couple of years ago. So this is definitely a cool one to grab. You can probably also grab it on CD. I'm not sure if it's available on streaming or not. I would assume it would be. Great White is a pretty popular band from the 80s and early part of the 90s. So you got that one on my list. And then the last one I got is Gym Class Heroes, The Quilt. Gym Class Heroes, I know everyone knows their album is Cruel School Children. That was their like huge album that I think was their second album that came out. This was probably one of their most underrated albums, even though it did chart really well. It sold really well also. But this is one that I think people largely kind of passed over. So this was released back in 2008. It was their fourth studio album, double LP. It's going to run you about $27 online. This reached number 14 on the Billboard charts. Patrick Stump of Fall Out Boy did some production work. I think he also did some work on the music-wise on the album also. Bunch of great guest appearances. You got Busta Rhymes, the Dream. You got Daryl Hall of Hall & Oates. Like I said, I think Patrick Stump also did some stuff on here also. It is a great album. I would say if you're a fan of As Cruel as School Children, if you know their first two albums, definitely go back and stream this album because, in my opinion, it's really kind of one of those kind of lost kind of gems of the mid part of the 2000s. Well, that's all I got for today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. A bunch of great stuff coming out this week. Of course, I'm going to grab that Greta Van Fleet. I've already got that on pre-order at my local record store. Probably going to grab that Blur album also. Really kind of up in the air on those. I'll probably grab those jazz releases also. It's going to end up being probably a pretty expensive week for me. Definitely on the fence about a couple other ones. But drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you're looking forward to picking up this week. Of course, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me the old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. And that's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.